The song was like, I want to be tried by fire, purified. No one sings that part no more. When you're holding on to something so hard and clenching it with such tight fists, you're saying, God, I can do this in my own works better than you. Oh, what kind of pride is that? We are serving a God that operates out of abundance and not scarcity. I don't know who needs to hear that today, but you don't want to keep up with your word. Now you don't want to pray as hard. Ooh, now you don't want to pray as hard because God brought you through. Now you don't want to dive in the word as deep when God gives you your spouse, when God gives you the job, when God gives you all these extra resources. Now you don't want to pray as hard. Now you don't want to read in his word as much because you ain't struggling. Right? Right? What's good, family? Welcome to the Abide and Seek podcast, where we share the authentic and unfiltered Christian perspective to build in faith, purpose, and spiritual maturity. If you're new here, I'm Taylor, and if you're a part of the family, then welcome back. So for today, God put on my heart to read Deuteronomy 8. So we're really just going to be like reading through that today, walking through that scripture. I like to call this chapter a heart check chapter. I started in my Bible and everything. There's quite a few heart check chapters that I have marked because it's one of those things where it's like, okay, let me go back and just remember. Let me get my priorities straight. Let me just why am I doing the things that I do? Why am I choosing to walk in obedience instead of disobedience? Why am I choosing to take the high road and the narrow road, rather than this broad path that I see other people in society going down? So I just like to have these they're not little at all. They pack a punch. These heart check chapters, I have them marked in the word because I need those reminders sometimes. I need some of those, let's get back on track. Let's remember why you are doing this all to begin with. It almost reminds me of, and I'm not going to go too much on a tangent because I want to dive into Deuteronomy 8. It almost reminds me of whenever I would coach different dental students or college students, things like that. And I would just say, you remember that personal statement that you wrote to get into college, though that letter of intent that you may have used to get into your job, when you were on the other side, before you even got the job, before you got the position, before you got your acceptance, remember that personal statement? Look at that from time to time, because when you were typing that up, I'm sure you meant every word. I like to hope you did. I like to hope that you mean every word that you put into your personal statement, every word that you put into your letter of intent. So when you look back at some of those papers, when you look back at some of those essays that you've written as to man, I can't wait to be in this spot. But the next thing you know, you get into that spot and you start complaining and you're like, but I prayed for this, So that's why it's these heart check chapters are kind of like those personal statements for me. They're kind of just one of those reminders where it's remember why you're doing this. Remember what God rescued you from. Outside of just looking back on my testimony, there's that too. There's God's word that also just say, give these reminders to me as well, just so I can meditate on them. I can just keep on walking in them and just go back to them. Whenever I read over them, I just feel renewed all over again. So Deuteronomy 8 was placed on my heart. So we're going to be reading through that today. I'm actually going to be reading out of the Amplified version today. And I read through different versions, but when reading through this passage again through the Amplified, there are just a lot of things that were just tied together that I just want to highlight and talk about. And whatever the Holy Spirit wants to lead me to say and lead me to reveal, then that's what we're going to be working with. So now, before going into this, let's go ahead and give a background on what God is here to Deuteronomy 8. So long story short, with Deuteronomy 8, I like to call, and this is just me just when reading through it, but Deuteronomy is almost like Moses' diary. It's because it's his, it's right before he transitions and everything, but he's giving all of his final words and everything like that. So Deuteronomy is when this is after after, all of the plagues in Egypt. This is after splitting of the Red Sea. This is while, this is he's basically reflecting. He's reflecting on those times where he sent those spies out into Canaan. He's reflecting on those times when they worshiped the golden calf. So it's like it almost gives a deeper insight into what Moses was saying and the lessons that he's learned from. So that's why I like Deuteronomy, because that's what it just reminds. I like to call it Moses' diary. So because that's what it just reminds me of. So this is like towards almost like towards the end. From, if I'm getting my timing correctly, and if not, let me know. But like I said before, I am not a Bible scholar. But this is like one of those. This is like the last one, the last book that Moses wrote. Basically, just to give like those final words and just saying, hey, these are some of the things that I have learned from this experience, learned from leading y'all, and it sets everything up for Joshua as he prepares to lead the Israelites into the promised land. So that's just a little bit of setting up the stage of Deuteronomy 8 and just looking into that. And that's where this is coming from. So let's go ahead and read. I really enjoy this passage a lot. I feel like I say that about everything, but it's true. Every commandment that I am commanding you today, you shall be careful to do, so that you may live and multiply and go in and possess the land which the Lord swore to give to your fathers. And you shall remember always all the ways which the Lord your God has led you these 40 years in the wilderness, so that he might humble you and test you to know what is in your heart or mind, whether you would keep his commandments or not. So we're going to park there for a little bit. Now with verse 2, that's the one for me. That's the one where it's like God, like after leading you these 40 years in the wilderness, he will humble you and test you to know what's in your heart. Now I have like a couple, what is it? I think it's from my NIV. It's like a couple like little like footers or like footnotes kind of thing. So I'm just going to be reading just a couple of those. What it talks about for verse 2, it said, God tested the Israelites' faith. Would they trust in his ability to provide for them? And also saying that life is a laboratory of faith. God tests us to confirm the strength of our faith and the sincerity of our commitment to him. It is important to distinguish between testing and temptation. So it says right here, like we know God doesn't tempt anyone, what it says in like in James 1 verse 13, it is Satan who is the tempter, which is also mentioned in Matthew 4:3 and 1 Corinthians 7:5. Yet God can use Satan's temptations to test us. God redeems what Satan intends for evil and uses it to accomplish something good. This reminds me of what's that verse in Genesis 50? In Genesis 50 with Joseph. What's that verse? I know it's in Genesis. It's in Genesis 50. Genesis 50, verse 20. As for you, you meant evil against me, but God meant it for good, to bring it about that many people should be kept alive as they are today. That was what Joseph said to his brothers after like saving Egypt and making that plan. We're not going to go into that today, but that's just what it reminds me of whenever I read this, because God, like we have to remember, and I said this before, the devil is God's devil. Like, because the devil will not do anything that God won't allow, right? God will use what Satan tries to intend to trip us up. He's like, oh, I'm going to trip them up with this, God. Almost like what we talked about in Job. Like, I'm going to use this to trip them up. Oh, this person, they don't really love you. It's only because you're giving them all this stuff. This is what he said, like, even with going against like Job and stuff. Like, you know, you padded his life. You got this hedge of protection. You're giving him all these blessings. Of course, he's going to follow you. But take away his health. Take away his children. Take away all of his flocks and all of his investments. Take those away and see if he really worships you. And That's why, like, even though God allowed for the devil to do that, Job's faith still wasn't shaken. It was shaking, but it wasn't shaken. Okay. So, and sometimes we get like that, sometimes we may stumble, right? But our feet are still firmly planted, in the word of God and on the rock of God. So, yeah. So that's why it's like, even with reading through some of that, these are some of these reminders where it's like, the temptations that are used to test us. And it's almost like that verse, and I forgot where it is, but it's like, even when you're being tempted, God will always provide a way out. God will always provide a way out. Now I got to find out what that scripture is. I'm actually going to look it up right now. Beauty of the internet. So that scripture is 1 Corinthians 10:3. So I'll go ahead and read that. No temptation has overtaken you except what is common to mankind, and God is faithful. He will not let you be tempted beyond what you can bear. When you are tempted, he will also provide a way out so that you can endure it. And I like this scripture here because it's like, even God's not going to just let you just be out here. Like, God's not going to tempt you and not be like, okay, but this is the right door. Come through here. Like, you can stop it right here. Like, you can overcome this, because it says right here, he will not tempt you beyond what you can bear. There were some things, just to be a little transparent. I don't want to take away from reading through Deuteronomy 8, but just a little aside. There were some things that God would take away little by little, chipping away at some of the bad habits that I was doing, that were fueling the worldly desires that I had hidden in my heart. There were small things that he'd take away. And it's one of those things where it's like, if it was like a big thing to jump on, like first, then I would be like, oh Lord, this is too hard. Like, this is way too hard. Like, I can't fight this temptation right now. But because he gave me those victories and those overcomings and the strength to overcome those other quote unquote smaller hurdles, then that built up and fueled the faith and endurance that I had to start overcoming the bigger things. So it's one of those things where it's like, he's going to walk with you. Like, he knows the things that are big in your life, that are strongholds, versus the things where it's like, we just need to let go of it. He knows the things that we're battling against. He knows how much like these things mean to us. Like, there may be somebody with a pornography addiction, and there may be someone with an addiction to alcohol, and they're an addiction to alcohol. So it's like, even though these are two addictions, even though these are two strongholds, there may be someone who's struggling with alcohol looking at the person who's struggling with pornography, and it's like, oh, just cut the computer off. Oh, this is why we can't be insensitive to other people's strongholds, because we can't just say like, oh, cut the computer off. Have an accountability buddy. Put these things around we can say all these things, but there are certain strongholds that are just tougher for us. Even if it's the person that's struggling with pornography looking at, the person who's struggling with alcohol, like, oh, just don't go to the bars. Just don't go to happy hour. Don't go to any places that serve alcohol. Don't keep any alcohol in your house. Like, it's easier said than done when we don't recognize that this attack is spiritual. This attack is spiritual. Like, I'm not going to go deep into my testimony right now because, we got to get through Deuteronomy 8 today. But, and I don't want this video to be too long, but we're just going to let things flow. But yeah, I'm not going to go deep into it, but it's like, there's smaller things that were not as of a stumbling block for me that I was able to overcome. So that basically, almost like when you're playing video games and you have, you're defeating all these other like little villains, and then you got the big boss. Like, that's kind of like how it was for me, where it was like, okay, we got we're going to, tackle these smaller villains, these smaller enemies, and we're just going to keep on going up in levels. And then now you're about to face the big boss. You're going to face the big boss of this level. And that's kind of what it's like here when like facing temptations of different things, but recognizing that God is with you every single step of the way. He's not going to just let you just be out here. He's going to give you a way out. He's going to, like this verse, 1 Corinthians 10:13, this is something that you can hold on to for hope. Saying like, okay, I just feel tempted. I feel so tempted that I want to go into this stuff. God is there's a way out. We just have to have our eyes open enough to see it. We have to have our spiritually heart open enough to be available and listening to God's word, so that we can see like, okay, I know that this person texts me late at night saying, you up, what, you want to Netflix and chill? Like, God will provide countless doors saying, don't respond back to that text. Don't go over to that person's house. Don't try and open yourself up because it's a slippery slope. Like, it's one of those things where it's like he's going to provide all these way out, all of these ways to get out of it. But we have to just make sure that we are willing to walk through those doors and to not succumb to temptation. So let's keep on looking through some of these notes here too. Oh, I put in here Psalms 81. And with Psalms 81, I have it in here. So Psalms 81, I want to look at Psalms 81 because this is a psalm that basically almost it sums up a lot of like the feelings and emotions behind what Moses is saying here in Deuteronomy 8 when it comes down to saying remember the ways of the Lord, how he has led you through the wilderness for these 40 years, but also just reflecting on their time in Egypt, right? So with Psalm 81, we'll go ahead and take a look at that. So it says, starting in verse 6, I removed the burden from their shoulders. Their hands were set free from the basket. In your distress, you called and I rescued you. I answered you out of a thundercloud. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. Hear me, my people, and I will warn you. If you would only listen to me, Israel, you shall have no foreign god among you. You shall not worship any other god before me. I am the Lord your God who brought you out of Egypt. Open wide your mouth and I will fill it. But my people would not listen to me. Israel would not submit to me. So I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own devices. If my people would only listen to me, if Israel would only follow my ways, how quickly I would subdue their enemies and turn my hand against their foes. Those who hate the Lord would cringe before him, and their punishment would last forever. But you would be fed with the finest of wheat. With honey from the rock, I would satisfy you. And I wanted to read Psalms 81 because you want to know what part really gets me in Psalms 81? The verse that really gets me, outside of the fact that it's like these people are not listening to God and God's heartbroken for real. Like he gets heartbroken. He has emotions. That's why we're made in his image. We have emotions too. We know what it's like to be heartbroken. The verse that gets me is verse 12. I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own devices. I gave them over to their stubborn hearts. The fact that we like to say God won't give up on you, and he never does. God will not give up on you. But if you have these strong passions deep enough, and your heart is so stubborn that you're just like, yeah, God, I know you're telling me to surrender my entire life, but I'm not going to give you this 10% here. I'm not going to give you this 20%. I'm not going to release this door. I'm not going to give you my job. I'm not going to surrender all of my life to you, just a piece of it. God, it says right here, I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own devices. Or I think in other versions talks about like following your own desires. I actually want to read that just to see where it just talks about that. Psalm 81 here, verse 12. Yeah. Yep. So, in this one right here in the Amplified version, for Psalms 81, verse 12. So I gave them up to the stubbornness of their own heart, to walk in the path of their own counsel. Like, that is just, this is why we need to do a heart check. This is why we need to do a heart check. And I know that this is definitely not going to be the last time that we talk about heart checks, that we talk about taking spiritual inventory, that we talk about just doing an investigation in your own heart so that you can see like, okay, Lord, what are areas that I'm not surrendering over to you? I don't want you to give me over to my stubborn heart. I don't want I don't want to follow my own desires, because just like what we talk about, if I follow my own desires, it leads me down nothing but a path of pain, nothing but a path of wickedness, nothing but a path of rejection and hurt. And it's just not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling. It's not a good feeling. Like, I know what it's like to walk down the path of righteousness, but I also know what it's like to walk down the path of wickedness. And there is nothing down that path of wickedness that's for me. There is no benefit. And even if there is benefit, it's temporary. It's temporary benefit. It's temporary satisfaction. It doesn't last. Even if you get happiness, where's the joy? Where's the peace? I ain't get none of that when walking in my own ways, when walking in my own desires, in my own devices. So why would you have to have a desire for God to want to change you, for God to truly be Lord over your life. When you make that decision that God deserves my everything, that God deserves to be Lord over my entire life, that I am going to surrender everything over to God, there is nothing that I am going to hold on to with my own hands that I think will be prosperous, that I am not going to give over to God. The moment that you make that decision, the moment that you're real with yourself and you're like, Lord, I'm living with open hands. If you tell me to leave this job is in your hands. That means you have another door for me elsewhere. If you tell me to walk away from this person that I know we probably had history with, but I know that they're just going to keep on leading me down a path that is not of you, and you're telling me to let it go, Lord, I'm going to trust you. There should be nothing that we are holding on to with such clenched fist that we are putting above God. If God's like, yeah, what's in your hand, what you're trying to hold on to, give it to me. And if we're like, like, yes, things will be hard. I'm not saying that I'm just willingly like, okay, goody. Okay, Lord, you have it all. Things are going to be tough. But then it's like, okay, why is this tough for me to give up? Why is it tough for me to give up alcohol? Why is it tough for me to give up fornicating? Why is it tough for me to give up pornography, masturbation? Why is it tough for me to give up smoking weed? Why is it tough for me to do all these things or to not compromise at my job? Why is it tough for me to not cheat? Like, why is it tough for me to be honest? Why is it tough for me to be a people pleaser? When you start doing this investigation and you take this spiritual inventory in your heart and you do this like with God at your side, there's a reason why the Holy Spirit is called a counselor. There is a reason for that. When I say I have had like my therapy with God, I mean, therapy, from a therapist. Oh, it's 10 out of 10. It's amazing. God can use people in their gifts to be able to do that. But when God sits down with you and he's really going through the inner workings of your heart, my Lord, have you in tears. Have you in tears working through these things and just it's such beautiful and divine revelation, because it's like, I didn't know the reason why it's hard for me to stop people pleasing is because I'm there at a young age. I didn't get the validation that I thought I was supposed to have. It's hard for me to stop being lustful and to stop or to continue to chase after a success because I'm afraid of rejection. Where did that root of rejection come from? Like, so it's, man, those therapy sessions with God, this is the reason why I have heart check chapters. This is exactly why I have heart check chapters, because when God takes you through these inner workings, man, it's so beautiful, because I'm on the other side and I'm giving it to God. Like, and I think I've said it before on this channel, like God cannot comfort what you cannot confront. He can't comfort something that I'm trying to hold on to. Instead, just like what it says right here in Psalms 81, verse 12, I gave them over to their stubborn hearts to follow their own devices. Don't do that. Lord, don't give me over to my own hands. I don't want to clench onto something where I am just like, yeah, Lord, me holding on to this will do a better job than you. That's what you're saying. When you're holding on to something so hard and clenching it with such tight fists, you're saying, God, I can do this in my own works better than you. Oh, what kind of pride is that? What kind of pride is that? I can do something better than God can in his hands? Excuse me? But I'm saying these things not to get at you. I'm saying this to myself. I am saying this to myself because I live like that sometimes. Like, you know what, Lord? I know I'm supposed to trust, all of these things and my future is in your hands. Yeah, but I'm going to hold on to this little thing right here and not surrender it to you because I know how this thing works. I know how to work my way around this because my own self-sufficiency is better than anything that you're trying to give me. What? That sounds crazy coming out of my mouth. What I'm holding on to, what I see just by this is why we got to change our perspective too. The things that we see, they don't stand a chance compared to what God can reveal to you. They don't stand a chance. They don't stand a chance. The fact that God can say, let there be light, and there was light. The fact that it says in Isaiah, I can make rivers in deserts. The fact that God split the Red Sea. The fact that God can make manna fall down from heaven and quail come out of the blue. Like, I can't rely on just the things that I see right here because this will lie to me. Satan will use what I'm seeing in my circumstances like, yeah, Taylor, you living for God, and that's cute. This is why you're still single. This is exactly why you're still single. You think that like this is why the enemy will literally toy with your mind with the things that you see. The enemy will literally toy with you. Yeah, you still single. There's no people out here that really love God for real. People won't really listen to this message. People are not desiring for a deeper connection and relationship to God. People are not like, God's not telling you to let go of this. It makes you feel good, right? Like God's not telling you to let go of these people because it feels good to hang around them. Their validation, it means everything to you versus God's validation. These are lies. Like absolute lies. And it's because, and I wrote this down in my journal some time ago, like the enemy, he's been watching us since birth. He knows our weaknesses. He knows our insecurity, just like what I talked about before. He knows that because he's been watching us. So if he but the thing is that I know how to shut those lies down because I'm diving into my word. I can recognize the lie of the enemy versus recognizing the voice of my Father. I also, because I'm living life with open hands, because I am doing my best, and I have to say doing my best. I'm doing my best to get all of these idols out of my heart because I can't just say, oh yeah, I got all the idols removed from my heart. I can't say that with honesty. And I say I can't say that with honesty because if it took 30 years for these idols to form in my heart, how long do I think it's going to take for these idols to get out of my heart? 30 days? That's foolish. That's foolish. It's like, yes, God is doing it. That's why this is a journey. This is a marathon, not a sprint. If it took years to develop an addiction, if it took years of this pride to develop, of years of this insecurity, years of this anxiety, years of being fed the lies of the enemy and believing it as truth, then it's going to take some time to heal. It's going to take some time to recover. It's going to take some time to be like, okay, it starts with the desire though. It starts with the desire of opening up my hands and saying, God, my heart is yours. Lead me through working through this spiritual inventory so that I can get to the root of why I feel this way, of why this is such a strong, of why this is going on, why I think the way I think, why I do the way I do, why I act the way I act. Like, God will take you through it, but it's going to take some time. It's going to take some time. It's going to take some time to heal. I've been harping on this point. I'm only on verse 2. This is what I mean. This is what happens when I walk through my heart check chapters. Yeah, I'm only on verse 2. My goodness. And we're already 30 minutes in. So let's see how far this goes. So then also, I have my other Bible here. And I'm just going to read through this. This is NIV. And it has like a section in here that I wanted to read because I feel like this explains it nicely. It talks about why did testing come to Job. And but this is just, I really just like to highlight why are believers tested in general. So I'm just going to read this straight out of this section. There is no single simple explanation for why believers undergo suffering, but the Bible offers several reasons. First, testing strengths of our character. James says the testing of your faith produces perseverance. This is James 1:3. Painful situations produce character the same way regular exercise builds muscle tone. Peter adds that testing proves our faith is genuine. 1 Peter 1:7. When the heat is on, we reveal who we actually are and what we truly believe. Peter also suggests that this testing of faith gives honor to God. Remaining faithful despite prolonged agony testifies to others how much we value and trust God. Ooh, that's so good. Ooh, that's so good. Job notes that testing can rid our lives of unrefined qualities. That's Job 23:10. Much the way a blast furnace brings out the impurities of metals, testing removes sinful attitudes in us. And that's when, like in Job 23:10, where it says, we come forth as gold. Oh, that's so good. I'm going to talk about that in a second, because that one's good. The writer of Hebrews says that testing proves believers are God's children. This is Hebrews 12:6-8. Every wise parent disciplines a child in love to help the child develop. When God brings testing, it reminds us that we are his children. So why did testing come to Job? It never occurred to Job that God was allowing the testing because he was pleased with Job, especially since he mentioned, have you considered my servant Job? There is no one on earth like him. This is Job 1:8. There may be no reason behind our testing other than that God is pleased with us. He may want to reveal himself to us and others through such testing. I want to go back. To when I talked about how testing rids our lives of unrefined qualities. Just like being like refined and being purified. Like, I think that's the reason why some people, I would just see memes on like social media where people are like, what is it? The song was like, I want to be tried by fire, purified. No one sings that part no more. The people are like, I don't want to be purified no more. I'm tired of the fire. But it's like that fire is God's love. I'm not saying that I want all these afflictions like Job. I ain't saying all that. But I'm just saying it just goes to show how we're just going to be such a better child of God on the other side. If God's like, hey, you got these impurities in your heart, I need to get rid of that. Just like how it says with the impurities in metal, how it has to go through the fire, but it becomes beautiful on the other side. Man. But that's the reason why. That's the reason why, just like what it says in verse 2. He might humble you, and it humbles you too. That's included in there. Humble you and test you. Because there are some times, and I remember hearing this in a sermon, I think it was Pastor Jerry, where he was like, you may not be delivered from it, it's just dormant. Because it's like, oh yeah, like if you're like, oh yeah, I'm like overcome this stronghold. I'm good with, like, for example, I'm just going to be real. Oh yeah, like me and my abstinence journey. Oh, it's banging. It's good. Like I'm overcoming like these lustful thoughts. I'm overcoming these like lustful addictions and things like that. I'm reframing all these things. But what happens when you get in a relationship? When you're like, ooh, I know this is the person I'm supposed to marry, but now I'm out here starting to go down that trail of lustful thinking. Now I'm out here going like, I'm out here really tempted if we're alone together. But then, so it's like, are you really delivered from it, or is it just dormant? It's easy. It's not easy. It's actually not easy. But for the sake of these words, it's easy to be abstinent when you're single. But how about testing that abstinence when you're in a relationship? Oh my goodness. Like, I'm sure that's going to be tough. That's going to be very tough because, so it's like, so that's why, but it's all still the same. And and I like the fact that it says it humbles you, because it's like, it's prideful to think, oh yeah, I face this, I can overcome it. Without God's strength, I can fall for anything. So it humbles you to be like, yeah, I'm not perfect. I can't overcome this without God here. But that goes back to just like we talked about with 1 Corinthians. God will not tempt you beyond you having a way out. But also in this training season, like, hold on to the things that you're learning. Hold on to diving into this word. Don't ever think that you're too good to relearn a lesson that you've had in the past. That's why I don't like approaching scripture where it's like, for example, if there's like a familiar story that is being preached on, David and Goliath, for example. If there's like a common story, oh yeah, I know that story. Oh yeah, it's Christmas time. I know about baby in a manger, Mary. Like, if you approach the text like that, like I already know that, you will be divinely humbled. Divinely humbled. If you think that you can just read a story that you think you're familiar with and not think that you can get new revelation out of that, you are joking. You are kidding yourself, because this is a living word for a reason. This is the living word for a reason. And it's sharper than any two-edged sword. When I say you can pick up any story in this book, no matter how familiar you think you are with it, and think that you can't get something new out of that, or God can't teach you anything new, that's a stubbornness that you need to fix. There's some pride in there that you need to look at. So, so that's what I'm only on verse 2. Child, it is 36 minutes in. So let's keep on going. Okay. He humbled you and allowed you to be hungry, and fed you with manna, a substance for which you did not know, nor did your fathers know, so that he might make you understand by personal experience that man does not live by bread alone, but man lives by every word that proceeds out of the mouth of the Lord. And I do have something in here, like a footnote from my Amplified Bible. It says humans have a spiritual nature that can be satisfied only by spiritual nutrients of God's word. God's word is man's only wisdom and hope that people need to know to follow him in a world of sin, uncertainty, and death. So I'm gonna read that part again. We need these spiritual nutrients to give us wisdom and hope from God's word, because we need to hold on to this and follow God in a world of sin, uncertainty, and death. When people study it, rely on it, and apply it, the word will prove to be both wise and right. And there was, I wrote down like this quote, because when reading through that, it reminded me of this quote here. It says, I've tested the warnings of scripture and found them to be true. Now I'm testing the promises. And it's one of those things where it's like, that's why I was mentioning, I know what it's like to walk down that path of wickedness. I know too much about the other side as to the reason why I am not going back. You can't pay me. You cannot pay me to be disobedient to God again. You cannot pay me to deliberately walk in wickedness. You cannot pay me, and I keep saying pay, but you just cannot tempt me. There's nothing I can see on social media. There's nothing I can see or like any type of lie the enemy can convince me with, there is nothing that the enemy can throw at me that I am going to, even if it's just me and God, we gonna be partners for life then. For real. There is like, because I don't want to go down that road of pain again. What is it? It's when, what's that phrase? It's like, if you do something twice expecting the same result, that's insanity, something like that. Like, if I think that walking down wickedness will give me a better result than what God can provide for me, that's foolish. If I think that I can do more with gripping onto things in my own hands than the life that I can have when living it open to God, that's foolish. Simple. And I'm not saying this just to make y'all feel bad, nothing like that. Because when I say these things, like I said, I'm saying this to myself. I go back and watch these videos and I'm like, dang, I'm all up in my business. Like, for real. And that's the reason why, God has me recording these things and all these lessons, because just like I said, I am not going to be too prideful to where I need to go back to a video and I'm like, dang, I thought I learned that lesson in that season. Looks like I got to learn that lesson again. Or it looks like that lesson needs to be applied in a different way for this type of lane. So yeah. So I just a little something, and I like the fact in here where it talks about so that you might understand by personal experience that man does not live by bread alone. And I like this because some experiences you do have to learn for yourself. Some experiences, it's like you can listen to other testimonies. You can listen to how your mom's mom, your mom's mom, you can listen to, grandma and them and their testimony and how much God has changed their life. But the moment that you believe, the moment that you're like, God has changed my life for real. Oh, it's the moment that I know God for myself, the moment that I have met God for myself. Oh, I'm holding on to that. I'm holding on to that for real. So that's why it's like, I like that it says in there, so that he might make you understand by personal experience. When you meet God for yourself, when God shows up at your lowest moments, and that's something that you can hold on to. God showed up for me right there in the midst of my tears, in the midst of my suffering. He was there and he's still here. And I know by personal experience, this is the reason why my faith is strong. My faith is solid. The reason why I know that he is my firm foundation. Because when I tried to build my house on sinking sand, when I tried to build my house on wickedness, it did nothing but tumble over every single time. So when you know by personal experience, that conviction, it's strong, bro. Something that you can reflect on for real because of that personal experience. It's one thing to be like, oh, that's a good story. That's a brilliant testimony. But when you have that testimony for yourself, you give a different kind of praise. You give a different kind of shout. For real. Let me keep on going, child. I'm only in verse 4 and we got more verses to go. And it's already 42 minutes. So it says right here, your clothing did not wear out on you, nor did your feet swell these 40 years. Dang, I want to stop there too. So I like the fact that verse 3 talked about, no. Verse 2 talks about your spiritual nature, the things that you need to feed on spiritually. Verse 3, verse 4, these things talked about your physical needs. It means that God is willing to provide for you spiritually and physically. That's why, God's not going to just neglect. God's not going to leave you out here neglected. You are his child. He's going to care for you. Just like what it says in Matthew's, if a father on this earth knows how to give good gifts, then what kind of gifts will our Father in heaven give us? So I like the fact that God mentions in this verse that he's going to supply for you spiritually and supply for you physically. Now, I'm not saying you have to be out here winning the lottery and being in a big mansion and the flyest cars or the name brand clothes and shoes. I'm not saying all that, but he will provide. It says right here, your clothing did not wear out. Like your feet did not swell these 40 years. My feet swell now and I'm 30. So anyway, so verse 5, therefore know in your heart, be fully cognizant that the Lord your God disciplines and instructs you just as a man disciplines and instructs his son. Therefore, you shall keep the commandments of the Lord your God to walk, that is to live each and every day in his ways, in fear and worship him with awe-filled reverence and profound respect. Now, I also like in here in this Amplified version, it mentions in here Proverbs 8:13. And I want to read that because when I read it, it just gives you a perspective because it says right here how it says, keep his commandments, live the way that we're supposed to live in his ways, fear and worship the Lord. And it's like, okay, well, how? How can I do this and honor God and live a life that honors God? And that right here is in Proverbs 8:13. So it says right here, the reverent fear and worshipful awe of the Lord includes the hatred of evil, pride and arrogance, and the evil way, and the perverted mouth I hate. And I wanted to mention that in there too, because we can't be out here as believers, and know that I'm saying this with all love. And I'm not saying this with any judgment either, but we can't be out here as believers enabling evil ways, enabling wickedness, allowing for compromise in our lives. Like it says right here, we need to hate the things God hates. We need to hate pride. We need to hate arrogance. We need to hate wicked ways. Because if I'm over here like, oh yeah, like this is acceptable, it's fine. I can have all of these areas in my life, but I can still lean on myself. I can still walk around in arrogance. Like if we think that we can live a life, this is what it said in James. How it said in James, like you can't be a friend of the world and a friend of God. You can't do that. Like, you can't do that. I don't want to be a friend of this world. If that means that because when I'm loving, just like what it says right here in Proverbs, when I'm loving pride, arrogance, perverted speech, evil ways, if I'm loving this stuff and I am not hating evil, then I'm an enemy of the Lord. I don't want to be an enemy of my Father. If there's anything that God hates, then I'm going to hate it too. I'm just going to be a road dog like that to the end. Like, if there's anything that God says is unacceptable, it's unacceptable then. If there's anything that God's like, yeah, this displeases me. Okay, God, I ain't doing it. You don't have to worry about me. You do not need to worry about me. I'm not going to do it. If it displeases God, if it displeases my Father, who is supplying everything for me, and how it says, in order to have reverential fear and worshipful awe of the Lord includes the hatred of evil. So I just can't be out here professing, with my mouth, oh yes, I love the Lord, but you out here supporting wickedness, you out here enabling evil, double-minded, what James talks about. That's why I love James, y'all. I love James. James will give it to you. Like, he will give it to you straight, for real. So like, you can't be double-minded out here. We can't be double-minded. We can't. So that's why it's like, when it says to keep his commandments and to walk in his ways and to fear him, to worship him, to worship him, that means to hate the things that God hates. Are we doing that? Anyway, let's keep on reading. We got a couple more verses. I say a couple, but it's a lot. So, for the Lord your God is bringing you into a good land, a land of brooks of water, of fountains and springs, flowing forth in valleys and hills, a land of wheat and barley, and vines and fig trees and pomegranates, a land of olive oil and honey, a land where you will eat bread without shortage. I like I like in the ESV version when it says without scarcity. I love that. In which you will lack nothing, a land whose stones are iron, and out of whose hills you can dig copper. I want to stop there for a second because it talks about, and I love the fact that it says you can eat bread without scarcity. I'm not just talking about just eating food. I'm not just talking about that. There was a phrase or a quote that stuck with me for a while. We are serving a God that operates out of abundance and not scarcity. I don't know who needs to hear that today. We're serving a God that's like especially for us who are single, for real. Sometimes we're like, oh, there's no good people out here. All the good ones are taken. They marry. They all these things. But God doesn't operate out of scarcity. All these people in this world, the same God that revealed himself to Saul to become Paul. And I think that there's a limit on God's power. We serve a God where he's not like, oh, where are the small little remnants of people that I need to operate with? No, he's not asking for that. He's not. If they're that's why I have to keep this at the forefront of my mind. God does not operate out of scarcity, but out of abundance. When I look back at my life 2 years ago, I was not doing this 2 years ago. God didn't snatch me up out of it 2 years ago. 2 years ago, I was out here in the streets. 2 years ago, I was out here wilding. So the fact that it's like we need to trust that God will provide in ways that we can't even see. That's why I said even earlier, if I'm just looking at things based on my current circumstances, I would grow discouraged. I would believe the lies of the enemy. But because I need to open up my spiritual eyes and look to see what God is able, the fact that I'm serving a God that operates out of abundance, when you can open up that part of your heart, remove that spiritual blindness and recognize those things, then your prayers look a little different. You start to walk a little different. You move a little different. When I recognize everything that I see right here, this is the natural realm, but look at how things are going in the spiritual realm. I can only imagine how things are moving. So anyway, so it just talks about just when we do the things that God instructs, the Lord will provide. You will not have scarcity. God will operate out of abundance. So I don't know who needed to hear that, but it could just be me. I might just be preaching to myself today. But yeah. So verse 10, when you have eaten and are satisfied, then you shall bless the Lord your God for the good land which he has given you. Beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments and his judgments or precepts and his statutes, which I am commanding you today. Otherwise, when you have eaten and are satisfied and have built good houses and lived in them, and when your herds and your flocks multiply, when your silver and your gold multiplies, and all you have increases, then your heart will become lifted up by self-conceit and arrogance, and you will forget the Lord your God who brought you from the land of Egypt out of the house of slavery. I love those passages of scripture, as you couldn't tell from my passionate voice. I love those passages because if and when, my teacher from dental school used to say, if we are elevated and we get all this abundance of increase, all these blessings, levels of elevation, we're promoted, we're all these things. and we don't remember this. And I like that it says, brought you from the land of Egypt out of the house of slavery. Because it's like, do you remember what you were brought out of? How often do you reflect on the gospel? Like not just your own testimony, but the gospel. The gospel that God had a plan from us from the beginning, even when we screwed up. That God loved us. Like the fact that, John 3:16, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten son. That whosoever believe in him shall not perish, but shall prosper and have everlasting life. Like, how often do we reflect on the gospel? Jesus died for all of our sins, yesterday, today, and forevermore. How often? Not just our testimony, not just plucking us up from the muck and the mire that we were in, plucking us out of the streets. Not just reflecting on our own testimony, but of all the sin that's happening. Out of everything that we see in the world, we can put our hope in a God for tomorrow. We can have our hope not just in this current world that we see, but we have hope that God's going to restore everything. That there will be that God's going to set things straight. I can put my hope that this is not just by chance and that God has everything divinely mapped out. I am so thankful that I can reflect on the gospel and still have hope. To know that Jesus is coming back. To know that this is not how the story ends. To have that hope to anchor you, this is what we need to reflect on. Because even when all this stuff, because God's going to bless you, right? It says right here, God's going to bring you into the good land. God will give you all these things. But it says in verse 11, beware that you do not forget. That you do not forget. Because how quickly can we forget? Our memories as humans, they ain't the best. They're not the best. That's the reason why the Israelites were complaining in the wilderness. Did you forget the slavery that I brought you out of? How quickly we forget. Oh, the moment that you get into this promised land that's fruitful, you get to have all these lavish houses, all of these flocks and all these things, but you don't want to keep up with your word. Now you don't want to pray as hard. Ooh! Now you don't want to pray as hard because God brought you through. Now you don't want to dive in the word as deep when God gives you your spouse, when God gives you the job, when God gives you all these extra resources. Now you don't want to pray as hard. Now you don't want to read in his word as much because you ain't struggling, right? Right? Now you don't want to chase after him and diligently seek him because he's giving you the desires that you want. I feel the conviction so strongly. So strongly. How can I ever have a heart to complain? How can I ever think that anything around me is because of the work of my own hands? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. That's prideful. And I think that's the reason why. Not I think. I know. I know that's the reason why God has me going through these things, going through these lessons right now, and to record them. Because he's like, I want you to remember. Remember me. That reminds me of, what is that song, Coco? Remember me. I can't sing anyway, but it's just like, even though that song's real sad too. But like, honestly, God's like, remember me. Remember who brought you out of slavery, who brought you out of Egypt, who brought you out of that valley, who cleaned you all up, who gave you these things, who fulfilled your desires physically and spiritually. Remember me. Remember me. Remember me. Because when you don't, beware. Beware. So that's so he's already saying, this is why you need to keep this up. Continue. Will you seek after him as fervently, as strongly when you're on the mountaintop as you are when you're in the valley? Will you seek after him and pursue after him with such, like, to seek after his heart above everything, no matter what he gives you, no matter what he takes away, no matter what tests he gives, no matter what he puts in front of you, no matter what blessings you receive? Will you still strive after him and seek after him with the same heart? God, I need you above everything else. God, I'm living a life with open hands. Everything I have, I just want to be a good steward. Yes, you're giving me these blessings. That's great. Fantastic. Yes, you've given me a sound mind. Yes, you have cleaned up my heart. You've broken down these strongholds. You've revealed the idols that I had in my heart. Lord, thank you. I want to be a good steward of what you're investing in. Because what is it for God to do all this investing and we squander it? On what? Pride? Squander it on pride, thinking I got myself here? Please. Like, the work that God does in us, the transformed mind, the transformed heart, the surgery that God performs. Oh, I can't do that on my own. These words, even on these episodes, like, this is not me. I am not. Yes, I'm a dentist. I have a doctorate degree. Sure. There are no degrees on this earth that can give me the revelations from the school of the Holy Spirit. Like I said, I never went to seminary, never did all of that stuff. It does help, I'm sure. I mean, we need people that are sound in these things. I think education is important. But the revelations that I receive from the Holy Spirit, I'm not smart enough to say these things. I'm not smart enough. I don't care how many degrees I get. I'm not going to be smart enough to say all of these lessons. I'm not. Because God's always going to be teaching me something new. That's why this word can prevail for thousands of years. How something that was written, even like just years ago, can still be applicable today. Because God's word is timeless. Anyway, let's keep on moving. I'm almost done. Bear with me, y'all. I love going through these heart check chapters because I just love it. Starting in verse 15. He led you through the great and terrible wilderness with its fiery serpents and scorpions and thirsty ground where there was no water. It was he who brought water for you out of a flinty rock. He fed you manna in the wilderness, a substance which your fathers did not know, so that he might humble you by dependence on him, and that he might test you to do good things for you at the end. Now, I think I have some notes on this because that's verse 16. Let me see. Yes. Okay. So for some notes for verse 16, this was something that was at the bottom of my Amplified Study Bible. It says, basically, it's when reflecting on all the things that God provided for us. These are small little things so that we can build dependence on God. Granted, we depend on him all the time. Every single breath is dependent on him. Every time we walk out our doors, dependent on him. But God will show himself up to you by giving manna, by giving them water out of a rock, by protecting them from the serpents and scorpions. These are tangible things that the Israelites can hold on to say, I am dependent on God because he provided for me when I was in a wilderness. He provided for me when it looked like there was no way out. God will provide these tangible ways so that we can build that dependence on him. So that's why it just went through that cadence of like, I protected you from this. I gave you this. I provided this to give you tangible things to hold on to. Like, I remember in those moments when I thought I didn't have anything and God still provided when it didn't make any sense. These are the tangible moments that we need to hold on to. So something that it says in the Amplified Bible, Through the whole experience in Egypt and the wilderness, the Lord was leading his children into decisions that would bring out their true nature. Difficult as the tests were, the Lord knew what was necessary to reveal to the Israelites not only his character, but theirs as well. Now, I'm going to be parking here. I know I'm already an hour in. Listen, this part is big for me. God doesn't test us. And I know I read it from my other Bible too. God doesn't just test us just so we can keep on building that endurance, things like that. But he tests us to reveal ourselves to ourselves, to reveal me to me, to reveal the emotions that I thought were hidden, to reveal some of the wickedness that we have in our own heart. Because listen, there were some things that God called me to let go of. And when God told me to let go of it, it revealed the stronghold and the grip that I had on it. God will test us to reveal our hearts to ourselves. How there are some wicked things that are hiding in there. When God was testing me last summer, saying, will you still pursue after me if I want you to be single for the rest of your life? If I don't give you the spouse, if I don't give you the children, will you still seek after me? That right there was a pivotal moment for me last summer, because when God asked me that question, it revealed the idol, the grip of the idol that I had on marriage, that I had on family. So God will ask you these questions. If I asked you to leave this, would you do that for me? If not, that reveals how tight of a grip we have on something. And there have been countless things that I didn't know were idols. I had no idea they were idols in my heart until God asked me to deliver them over to him. I had no idea what those were. So anyway, but yeah, so I didn't know what those were until God asked me to open up my hands and reveal them to him. For God to reveal to me, will I still seek after him if I'm single for the rest of my life? Will I still seek after him if I'm going to be living in an apartment my entire life, if I don't get the job, if I don't get the house? Will I still seek after him like if my health is no good? Will I still seek after him if I'm battling all these things? That right there will reveal what's inside of your heart. And that's the reason why God tests us. God doesn't test us just for kicks and giggles, for funsies. He doesn't just test us for that. He doesn't test us for that. He tests us also, not just the reason that I said earlier in this episode. He tests us so that we can see our own nature in the mirror. It's easy for us to point out the flaws in other people, but the moment that God takes our heart, puts it on a platter in front of us, and it's like, you see that? Ugh. Like, do you see that wicked nature in there? And then now with that test, what are we going to do about it? Now what? I'm a person that's like, don't just point out the problem. Tell me how to fix it. Don't just point out the issue. How can we come to an agreement here? I love, because that's when conversations, that's when reconciliation, that's when healing is most fruitful. Don't just point out the problem. Give me a solution. So that's what God would do with these heart checks, where God's like, you see your heart? Let's take some spiritual inventory. What are some things that you're gripping onto? What are some things that you need to live out with open hands? What are some things that you're not stewarding well? What are some things that you need to steward better? So that's why I wanted to just park there for a second, because God won't just test us just to test us. He tests us to reveal ourselves to ourselves. I didn't realize how wicked these things were hiding in my heart until God revealed it to me. But then now he's like, okay, now what are you going to do with the information that I gave you? Now what? It's one thing to hear these things and you're like, whatever. But now what? Now that I pointed out the flaw, are you going to fix it? Now that I told you these things, to give these things and live a life with open hands, will you still love me? Will you still seek after God? Will you still, are you just seeking after his hand or his heart? That's what it really means. To seek after his heart, not just his hand and what he can give you. Anyway, let's keep on going. We almost done. We got just a couple more verses here. I didn't even read verse 17 because it says, otherwise you may say in your heart, my power, the strength of my hand has made me this wealth. But you shall remember with profound respect the Lord your God, for it is he who is giving you power to make wealth, that he may confirm his covenant, which he swore, solemnly promised to your fathers, as it is this day. So that's where the seed of pride can come from. That's why we need to train our eyes to keep them focused on God. Because if we focus on the things around us, this home, it's because of me. It's my decisions. It's my decorating skill. I got this job because of my own efforts, my networking. It's not because of your own hand. It's not because of your own power. You ain't do nothing. It's because God is blessed. Every good and perfect gift comes from God. In the moment that we recognize that, that's why we need to humble ourselves. This is why God is constantly testing us, because he wants to make sure with the blessings that he's about to entrust in you, that you won't start to say things like in verse 17, my power and the strength of my hand has made me this wealth. So it wasn't the gift that God gave you, right? It wasn't the skills that God gave you. It wasn't God positioning you at the right place at the right time to meet that certain person and to network with that person. It wasn't because God gave you favor on your application. It wasn't it's my power and that's so arrogant. That's so prideful to think that you got there on your own. Heart check. Anyway, let's keep on reading. Verse 19. And it shall come about, if you ever forget the Lord your God and follow other gods and serve them and worship them, I testify against you today that you will most certainly perish like the nations which the Lord causes to perish before you. So shall you perish, because you would not listen or obey, actually. You will not listen to and obey the voice of the Lord your God. So I'm going to read that last part again. Like the nations which the Lord causes to perish before you, so shall you perish, because you would not listen to and obey the voice of the Lord your God. And that's it. That's the end of chapter 8. That's the end of chapter 8. We almost done. Those last two verses put things into perspective. Because it's okay, the way that God elevated you and promoted you and allowed for people around you who did not have your best interest to fall. He said the same way that they fell, you about to fall. All because of what? I don't listen to and obey God's commandments. And that's my own choice. So so God is warning you and just like what it said earlier, right? Just like what it said earlier, these verses are connected. When it says from verse 11, beware that you do not forget the Lord your God by failing to keep his commandments and his judgments and his statutes, which I'm commanding you today. That's verse 11, right? And just right here, verse 19, and it shall come about if you ever forget. So he's like, in case you ain't catch it the first time, in case you forget all the stuff that God has brought you through, in case you forget everything that I've delivered you from, that I saved you from, protected you from, provided for you while you're in the valley, in case you forget when you get all the lavish blessings, when you start to be fruitful, you start to see those works of God working through you, through your own hands, because of the gifts of the Spirit that's working in you. In case you forget, ding, 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 you will, in case you forget to keep these commandments, you will also, that's a warning. You will also perish like your enemies have perished. The same way that I protected you from the enemies and I cleared them out, I'll do the same thing to you. I'll do the same thing to you. Like, that's the reason why we don't need to just take God's blessings for granted. We don't need to take any type of gift that God has given us, any type of vision that God has given us, and just take the fruitfulness of it prospering for granted. We can't take it as a reflection of ourselves. We can't take it where it's like, oh, this is done by my hands. And if we neglect giving God the glory in anything that we do, he's like, oh, okay, bet. So, so I before heading out, this is it. We finishing up, I promise. I just got 3 scriptures. So God put on my heart, if there are, and I know I talked about it a little bit, but like, if you need some just in case scriptures, if you need some scriptures to remind you of your heart check, if you need some extra verses, and I have a lot of them, but these are the top 3 that God put on my heart to talk about today. Psalm 139, 23 and 29. Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me and know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. So that scripture right there can help you with the start of spiritual inventory, of really heart analysis, a true heart check, if you want to start praying over that verse. Another one to stay motivated, right? Joshua 1:8. Keep this book of law always on your lips. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. This is not just saying like, hey, if you just, keep your head down, you read the word and do a checkbox. It's not saying that. This is not saying that, but you want to keep your heart right in this. You want to meditate on God's word, because then you'll start to believe it. Then you'll start to realize it's God that brought me out of this. I'm therefore reminded to keep the commandments of God and to walk in obedience, because it's God that's providing these things around me. It's not me. Meditating on God's word day and night will remind you that it's God that has his hand on this. The moment that you try and step out of bounds, God's going to be like, bet. Do it in your own works if you want to. Do it in your own self-sufficiency if you want to. It ain't going to last. It's not going to sustain. Because there were things that I tried to do in my own strength. Where are they at today? They ain't work. They didn't work. That could be with relationships. That can be with projects. That can be with businesses. Anything that I tried to do in my own strength fell. But the things that I'm doing now with God, like with God leading the vision, with God following God's instruction, it's sustained effortlessly. Not saying that everything is just easy, but I'm just saying it's like, it's because God is leading this. Then why am I even trying to be worried about, oh, will this be prosperous? Will this be successful? Will this, I don't have to worry about all that, because God's hand is on it. I'm not saying I'm about to be out here just like famous, making money or all this stuff. Like, I'm not saying none of that. Because God's hand is on it, it's operating in the purpose in which he has set it on my heart for. So with me doing this, because God put this vision on my heart, God put a vision on your heart, I'm sure, to operate and walk in something, right? To fulfill the purpose that he has set for it. God's word does not return to him void. He wants a return on that investment. So I just wanted to be where if God's putting something on my heart to fulfill, then that means that he is going to sustain it through the extent of that fulfillment. He's going to be the one that carries it out. Because if I'm looking at, oh, this is my vision, this is my idea, oh, it's going to fall. It's going to fall very quick. very fast, if I'm not relying on the Lord to sustain it. Because this vision isn't mine, it's God's. This idea isn't mine, it's God's. And I'm doing my best to be a good steward of the assignment and the calling that he's placed on my life. Last verse here, Psalm 119:11. I have hidden your word in my heart that I might not sin against you. I like that verse a lot because the more you meditate on God's word, the more you meditate and understand God's character, it's like, how can I ever be double-minded? The enemy wants to keep you from reading your word. The enemy wants to keep you from getting to know God and to pray and to have that quiet time with him. The enemy's trying to keep you from that. So that's why it's like, I am meditating on your word. The more I am meditating on this word, it decreases my flesh and it decreases my desire to sin. There was like a quote that my pastor said that he writes at the beginning of at the front of every Bible that he has. He says, the more that I'm in the world, the more that I am in the word, I have my desire to sin decreases. The less I am in the word, the more my desire to sin increases. So, or it's more like the more that I'm in the word, it decreases my desire to sin. It's something along those lines, where it's like, if you're not in this book, then your desire to, of course, your flesh is going to increase. Of course. Because that's why, I'm not going to get into it today because, this podcast has already been long. But it's like, the more that we are away from God's word, when we start to grow far and we're no longer meditating on the goodness of God, on the character of God, on the love of God, on the gospel, when we are not meditating on those things, our flesh is going to just run wild. Because if you're not feeding the spirit, you're only feeding one other alternative. If you're not feeding your spirit, which is by the spiritual nourishment, right? If you're not feeding on this, you clearly feeding on something else. And when you feed on something else, it's going to grow your flesh. When you meditate on your word, you will grow the strength of the spirit within you, which will then weaken your flesh. Granted, we're going to have to just live with our flesh for our entire side on the side of glory, for our entire lives. We got to deal with the flesh. We're always going to deal with the flesh, but I can determine which one is in the front seat. I can determine with your own decision, with your own obedience, you can determine who's driving the car, who's driving the thought process of your life, who's at the forefront, whose motive is at the forefront of your decisions. That's when you can determine that's how you can determine whether or not, if you've been in your word and if you've been growing in deep intimacy with God, is when you recognize who's driving the car. Who's driving it? Your flesh or your spirit? It's one or the other. It's one or the other. But that's it, y'all. That's it. I've kept y'all long enough. Thank you for staying with me and going through one of my heart check chapters. I absolutely love just diving into this and talking about it because it just reminds you of why you're doing this to begin with. It reminds you of why you're choosing to live for God versus trying to live in your own nature. It reminds you why you choose to live for God's will and not for your own will. I don't want God to give me to my own stubbornness. I want to live for God. And sometimes times can get hard. Times just can't. It just can't. Or we're just wondering Lord, why are you testing me? Right here. Because he doesn't want you to forget who gave you the wealth. He doesn't want you to forget who gave you the blessings. He doesn't want you to forget who brought you out of slavery in that land of Egypt. Whatever that Egypt is for you, you're in your testimony. He doesn't want you to forget. But that's all that I have for y'all. I hope this episode has blessed you. I pray that you have an amazing week, and I'll see you in the next episode.